Hello and welcome to the first online question and answer session for the 2-Day Diet Club. We're live from our living rooms. I'm Laura Quigley. I'm an ambassador for Prevent, and I also run the Facebook group. And this evening we're going to be going back to basics, perfect for those who are beginning the diet and also for those who want a refresher. And to help us do this, I'm honoured to introduce Michelle Harvie, author of the 2-Day Diet and award-winning research dietitian. Thanks so much for joining us, Michelle.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure. I'm delighted people are still interested in the diet. It's great.
Yeah. So we're going to be covering the diet, the books, research, and also the Facebook club. And if you've still got any questions at the end, please continue to pop them on the 2-Day Diet Club Facebook group. And there's details on the screen here, and we will always do our best to answer them for you. Anyone is able to post on the group. And alternatively, you can email the charity at info@preventbreastcancer.org.uk, and they will also do their best to answer any questions you may have. So should we get started, Michelle?
Yeah,
we've got lots of questions, hopefully elicit lots of useful information for our group members. So if we start off sort of going back to the beginning of the diet, so can you tell us a bit about the history of the 2-Day Diet and your involvement?
Yeah, so this is going back to 2006, 15 years ago. So we were one of the first groups to actually show that if a woman had gained weight but then managed to lose some weight and keep it off, then her risk of breast cancer would reduce, which was really exciting and a real sort of breakthrough. Actually, we were one of the first groups to show that in the world. But then, of course, we were faced with the issue of how do we get people to lose weight and keep it off? You know, I'm a dietitian, as you know, and I'd already been working in the field for many years at that point and realised that that was no mean feat. So we thought, myself and Professor Howe, who's my mentor, were sort of thinking, well, we need to get people to diet differently. And at the same time, we were aware that there were animal data showing that if we know that calorie restricted mice or rats don't get cancer, or if they get cancer, they can sort of manage it pretty well. But really interestingly, if an animal was calorie restricted just for a few days a week rather than the whole week, they actually had a better protection. So that's when the idea came, well, maybe if we get people to diet just a few days a week rather than every day, it might be easier for people to follow, which is a big issue. And then maybe it has this additional cancer protective effect. And so that's when we started doing the research.
Amazing. And it's really interesting in the first book that you track that progress of sort of trial and error of how you get people to follow a diet, really, isn't it? I think that's the main thing for us that want to diet. It's being able to stick to something that works for you, especially for people who tried lots of different things. And I guess that's where your link comes to the charity. So if you just perhaps
so that's a really good point. So so how did we come to link the diet with the charity? Well, so going back in 2006, because we came up with this idea of doing an intermittent or a 2-day diet, and my original attempt at the diet was really trying to keep it really simple. So my first attempt at the diet was milk and fruit and vegetables for 2 days a week, and then sort of healthy eating the other days of the week. And we applied to a different charity called Breast Cancer Campaign, it was called then. It's now Breast Cancer Now. And we were absolutely delighted. It got funded. It was actually one of their top scoring grants from that round. So it was above all the sort of very deep science. We were absolutely blown away. We did the study, which has been published. It's published in 2011, which did show that even with a sort of milk and fruit and veg 2-day diet, people could do it. They could do it for certainly up to 6 months. They were starting to get a bit fed up with it by that point, I have to admit. They didn't lose any more weight, or they weren't more likely to stick to it than they would be to a normal diet, which was what we were trying to achieve. But one of the interesting things was, with that 2 days of a low calorie intake, which was about 700 calories on 2 days a week, they were losing the same amount of weight as the ladies doing a standard diet, but they seem to have a better reduction in a hormone called insulin, which we know is linked to cancer risk. And so there were various reasons why we think that having spells of more akin to fasting and lower calorie days might actually induce you to lower your insulin levels. And so with that exciting data and having done this successful study, we then thought, well, let's make the diet even easier for people to follow. So hence the design of the diet we now have with the low carb days rather than the milk and fruit and veg. We went back to breast cancer now. We went back to various charities to try and get funding. And people said, people won't do it. No, it's not a flyer. We're not going to fund it. People won't do it. It won't make any sense. At which point we went to Prevent, who very kindly and with a bit of foresight decided to fund our research study, our follow-on research study, testing the diet. And I think the rest is history, because it definitely worked. It was more effective than the daily diet. And then we wrote the book and blah, 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 blah. And that was back in 2013. We actually finally finished that study. But Prevent basically decided to, stick their neck out and support this piece of research. Could have died back in 2009 if it was down to the other cancer charities. So that's where its sort of affinity to Prevent comes from.
And that's how I've managed to get the book. We buy it.
Yeah. And of course, all the proceeds from the book go to Prevent, not to myself or Professor Howe. We always make that point for good reason, because that's where the money should go.
Yeah. And I guess that then, furthers more research.
Exactly. Yeah. But it could have died then if not for Prevent or Genesis, as they were then called. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm glad it didn't anyway. It's an amazing diet. So I guess we may have covered some of this already, but so what's exactly the purpose of the diet? So why should we be doing it? What are the benefits? I know my purpose of doing it was in relation to breast cancer, but my reason around it is that actually it can prevent other things as well, can't it?
Yeah. So basically, as I've just explained, so we developed the diet principally as a diet which can help people lose weight and keep it off, with a view to then reducing their risk of breast cancer, potentially helping women who've had breast cancer, but also, as you say, helping improve people's health through all sorts of other things that are linked to weight. So there are 12 other cancers that are linked to weight, for example. There's diabetes, there's heart disease, there's dementia, you name it. I mean, I think pretty much most conditions will be improved with people being a healthier weight, including mental health. So, but we've tested it, we developed it and tested it within women either at risk of breast cancer or with breast cancer. And now we can talk about this a bit later, but we're now sort of testing it in other settings where it's showing great use. Yeah. So it's essentially a weight loss, a diet for weight loss and keeping it off.
Right. And it's the benefits then that the weight loss.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
And is there any way of explaining in like simple terms what like the science is, especially in relation to breast cancer, how the prevention?
Yeah. So the design of the diet was had a few things in mind. Firstly, we're aware that when we're fed, and particularly when we're overfed, all the cells in our body are in a sort of hyperactive state. They're constantly growing and then dividing and reforming themselves. And when our cells do that all the time. And when our cells do that, that's when little mistakes can happen and damage can happen to the cells, which is one of the first steps to cancer and a whole host of other diseases. So a damaged cell is then often the body will get rid of it and detect it as damaged and clear it out. But if it doesn't, that damaged cell can start causing problems and then become cancerous. So
Yeah.
So when we're fed and overfed, our cells are in this sort of rapid turnover and have a higher probability of generating a mistake and disease. When we're in a calorie restricted phase, or not having eaten for a while, or having eaten a reduced, less than we need for a while, our cells stop doing that, and they stop accumulating damage, and we think that they actually start doing the clear up process. So if they find, that's when they can start doing a bit of housekeeping,
Right.
and clearing up, because they're
Yeah.
not busy doing stuff. They can focus on housekeeping. So the idea of the 2 days of restriction is that you've got 2 days of fasting to enable yourselves to not be generating problems, but also to do a bit of maintenance. So that's the fasting days. Now, then the diet is also designed so the fasting days are easier to do from a satiety point of view. That's why they're higher protein, low carb.
Yeah.
And also because we're trying to keep the insulin level down. And insulin is a hormone that really does go up when we eat and when we overeat, and goes down when we fast. And that drives our cells to go into that overdrive. So we're trying to really make sure that the fasting days are easy for people to do, but really keep the cells in that sort of quiet, repairing state. And then the other days of the week, we don't go, oh, eat what you like. The other 5 days are healthy eating, and they make sure that you have all the nutrients and things that provide all the vitamins, antioxidants, fiber, and the balance of nutrients that you need for health, for preventing cancer and other conditions. So it's got a number of elements. So you've got fasting days, the fact that it's easier for people to do, and then you've got the healthy eating days as well. So there's like 3 components.
Yeah,
but all interlinked.
The science part of it, I know that it really motivated me when I read the books, because it is really useful to know. I think sometimes people start diets and that you don't know what's behind it, why.
And quite often, I have to be honest, that there isn't quite a lot behind a lot of the diets, especially the ones you can. I can spot them a mile off. I mean, there's just very arbitrary things sometimes come out. There can be a blue diet, and to be honest, anything that levels any level of restriction on people is going to limit their calorie intake, and they're going to lose weight. But sometimes it's just as simple as that.
Yeah, that's really useful. And I guess we talk about the diet, but I think this next question is an important part as well. But how important is it that people exercise when they follow the diet as well? I think we're all just on, let's get our restricted days done. So how does exercise come into it?
Yeah, so I've already mentioned the fact that it's not just about the restricted days in terms of diet, that we want people to be eating healthy on the other days as well, which is a bit of a cheat, really, because it's not just a 2-day diet, then, is it? But the other days feel okay. But exercise, physical activity, really important, Laura, as you say. So we know that irrespective of what people weigh and what their diet's like, if we're physically active and we exercise, that can reduce our risk of cancer, or help, if we've had cancer, help to stop it coming back, and also improve our overall, reduce our risk of things like heart disease, diabetes. Again, you name it, it's like the perfect pill, really, physical activity, and certainly in terms of mental health, it's second to none. So there are benefits from doing exercise in terms of health risk. And for the dieter, exercise is really, really important, because when we lose weight, and every dieter will recognize this, the weight loss slows down over time. And the reason it slows down over time is because we need less energy. As we get lighter, as our body gets used to having less calories, we adapt. So the exercise basically compensates for that reduction in your normal energy requirements. You'll then burn more calories by exercising, so it makes up for that. So it means your weight loss can continue, and also importantly, it maintains your muscle mass, because if you diet, particularly if you diet strictly and you don't exercise, you'll lose fat, which is what we're trying to get you to do, but you'll also lose muscle, and that's really unhealthy. for a start in terms of our health, insulin again, but also it means that your metabolic rate will drop quicker and your weight loss will really, really plateau out. So exercise is really important. And I think it's really important to say that you're not going to run a marathon on your diet days. You're not going to get a personal best in part run or whatever, probably on your diet days. But you can still exercise. You don't need to sort of put your feet up or go to bed for a day just because you're having a lower calorie day. A lot of people can function totally normally and do a sensible amount of exercise. If you do find it's difficult, and actually interestingly, a lot of people find if they exercise, it controls their appetite. Some people get really hungry when they exercise, and there's a difference between people. If you're one of those people, then obviously keeping your exercise to the non-diet days would make sense. But I think it's trial and error for people, really.
Yeah, I think just going back to what you said about muscle mass, I think that's something that I've really been educated on doing the diet, and understanding that, the importance of protein in that and exercise as we get older. I think that's kind of recently, with the increased, there's been increased stuff in the media about menopause, hasn't there, and how we need to retain muscle mass. So that's really interesting. I know it's in the books as well about the amount of exercise we should be doing. I don't think that's changed since the books were written.
No, I can't remember what we said in the book, actually, Laura. You've probably read it more recently.
I'll pop it on the Facebook group because I know I've done a reminder previously, sort of what the suggested exercise is. I think it's in line with what the NHS website says at the moment as well. So we'll definitely put that on. Again.
I mean, anything people do is a benefit. To be honest, we're probably talking about at least 30 minutes, 5 or 6 times a week of moderate intensity activity where you're getting your heart rate up and you're a bit out of breath. You can still speak. Or, that's the sort of minimum really on top of your normal sort of day-to-day function, really. So don't count your sort of, your walk around Asda in that, it has to be something on top of that. Anything up to, doing an hour or whatever a day is probably what you need to be doing. And particularly if you are trying to keep your weight off, we do realize that people generally need to do a bit more exercise again because of these adaptations that go on.
And if we could talk about how we measure progress on the diet.
So quite often, to be honest, people can often tell themselves how they're doing, just in terms of how they feel in themselves, and in terms of their sort of their energy, and a lot of people find they feel less sluggish, and those sorts of things. I mean, there is an adaptation. Again, sometimes it takes about a week or so to get into the diet, but once they do, they often feel really good. So, and then people can feel like their clothes getting looser. But if you want to sort of formally assess your progress, obviously bearing in mind that we're talking here about this is a weight loss diet and a weight controlling diet. So the most obvious thing is to weigh yourself, with the caveats of, weigh yourself. If you're going to weigh yourself. You can weigh yourself more than once a week, but you will find your weight will go up and down. It goes up and down with the time of the month for if you're premenopausal. It certainly varies in times of the day. Some people can weigh about half a stone heavier at the end of the day than they do at the start. So weigh yourself at the beginning of the day on reasonable scales, on a hard surface with consistent clothing, whether that's nothing or whatever you want to do, unless you're going to Boots, in which case you might want to put some clothes on. I don't even know. I actually don't know whether because there are scales, aren't there, in shops and pharmacies, but I don't know whether they're still open with COVID and, risk of.
We have one at our gym that you can do. That
is it still? It's still open, is it?
Obviously have to sanitize it afterwards, but
I wonder if some of the shops like Boots and Lloyd's used to have quite good scales. I don't know whether they've just thought, that's just that's like not an essential, is it, for them? But I actually don't know. So it'd be interesting to find. If anyone knows, let us know. So you've got weight. And then I think some of those, I mean, like your gym one will probably have a body fat measurement on it as well, will it? So when we're talking about losing weight, we're not really talking about losing weight. We're talking about trying to reduce people's levels of body fat, because that's where health risk comes in. If you're above a healthy weight for your age, but you're actually totally muscle bound, your health's not at risk. It's as if you're above a healthy weight and you're carrying too much body fat, which for women is around, anything above sort of 30-odd%. For men, it's around above 20% of your weight is fat, which sounds quite a lot, doesn't it? So we can be a third fat but still healthy, right? Because that's how it is. But believe you me, I can see people that are about 70% fat, and that's when it's that's not healthy, and that's when you start getting fat not only subcutaneously but also in and around your organs and in your muscles as well, and that's when the body doesn't start sort of not working as well, and the hormone balance gets shifted. So body fat is what we're really interested in. So your weight will tell you that to an extent. You can measure body fat with impedance scales, which are scales that you might see in the gym, or you can buy some yourself. You can buy them sort of relatively cheaply. There are ones the handheld ones are not very reliable. You're better off having the ones you stand on.
Yeah.
And they give you an idea of body fat. We've actually got I was reminding myself, there's a Ready Reckoner in the book. We could put that on the I've got a copy of that you could put on the page, Laura.
Yeah.
If you want to do that. And the other thing, which is dead simple, is our waist measurement. So a healthy waist measurement should be no more than half of your height. So people can work that out. And believe you me, I don't often see people with a waist measurement which is less than half of their height. And you can measure your waist quite simply with a tape measure. So all of those things just give you an idea of how you're doing. But people often can just tell by their clothes, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you can tell by your jeans. I think once you've been following the diet for a couple of months.
Yeah, jeans and keep those clothes that and when you do lose weight, keep those clothes, because they're a really good barometer. And I do worry that with lockdown and working at home, I think there's an awful lot of jeggings and leggings that have been worn, and I think people are going to get a right shock when they go to put their work clothes on. So maybe try and wear your work. I'm not suggesting going into work by any I'm not doing go back to it in the office, but put your work clothes on at home and just check them out, because
that's really interesting. I know the body fat thing, again, that's something that I've learned on the diet, that it's not just standing on the scales, it's about understanding the body fat. And perhaps if the scales aren't moving, don't be disheartened.
Yeah, especially if you're exercising as well. Yeah,
definitely. I think we've been quite quick to measure just on the scales, but it's remembering.
Yeah, it's easy, but it can be a bit disheartening sometimes for people.
It can, yeah. I think when we tend to hop on them quite often, don't we?
Yeah.
Restricted days, we want to make sure they've made.
The other thing to say, which you will have spotted, Laura, is that if you weigh yourself the morning after restricted days, you will appear a little bit lighter than perhaps you are, because you do lose some water on those days, which will quickly go back on when you start eating a bit more normally. But it's not a harmful thing. It's just that sometimes people get a bit demotivated if they weigh themselves then, and perhaps they might weigh themselves a few days later and they think they've put all their weight back on again, which they haven't. Yeah. So you'll be burning on your diet days. You'll be burning fat, and you'll also be losing some body water, which body water comes and goes. So
So I think in the book you suggest just sticking to 1 day a week, don't you, where you choose your day. And when you do, you weigh in.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So should we move on to the books now? Because I think we get a question quite a lot on the Facebook group. So there's 2 books that go through the diet, and then we've got the cookbook. So what are the difference between the books? How have they progressed since?
Well, the books are all fairly similar. I think basically the original book, the 2-day diet, has got like the whole story, the backstory, a lot of the background data, a lot of really good helpful tips for just trying to keep to diets and stuff about exercise as well. And the quick and easy is just a sort of pre-seed version of that. The diet didn't really change that much between the 2 books. And then the cookbook, again, just has a very simple guide to the diet with some really nice recipes. So they've all got recipes in. So it depends what kind of person you are, really. If you want the full story and a reference thing, go for the original book. quick and easy person, quick and easy. But the cookbook's actually a really nice recipes in. So, but since we did the books, having said that, the books were originally designed, so we were being really quite strict on the days being very low in carbohydrate and trying to achieve actually less than 50 grams in carbohydrate, which doesn't mean anything to most people. But because of that, we were looking at the different foods we could allow, and we worked out that some of the protein, particularly the vegetarian protein sources, were a little bit high in carbs, and so you could have them. So things like corn and were allowed, but in sort of restricted amounts. We didn't allow things like pulses and beans because they were quite high in carb on the diet days. And we also restricted certain fruits and vegetables that were particularly higher in carbs. And also we allowed avocado, but only a really stingy little bit of it, because we thought if people really overeat avocado, they might overeat on fat. Anyway, having said all of that, when we looked at what people were doing, and we got lots of feedback from people doing the diet, we felt the rules were just a little bit overcomplicated. And so when we actually looked at what people were doing, we realized that we could relax things a little bit. So the diet days are still low carbohydrate, but we do allow things like pulses and beans, and we do allow. We're assuming that people are not vegetarian or not vegetarian. That they quite often people are flexitarian, aren't they? So now the protein guide includes sort of vegetarian and non-vegetarian sources, and basically you can have pretty much any vegetable and pretty much any fruit on those days. So we've kind of just made it simpler, but it still adheres to the principle of the diet. So I think those are the main things.
Yeah. About the fruit and the vegetables, I think we've got asked that a couple of times. Or vegetable, and I guess you've made reference to it already, but there's an updated booklet, isn't there, that covers these changes?
Yes.
And the addition of the pulses, etc. And just to let people know, that's saved on the Facebook group in albums. So if you click on there, you'll be able to see the updating leaflet that we're talking about. And I guess talking about that leaflet, about what the sort of main changes are, I think you've covered them. But I think for the diet club, the revelation was the addition of pulses and lentils and chickpeas. I think we've been able to be a lot more creative with restricted days, especially adding those in. I think for me, doing the diet, it's definitely made it easier to be able to have those.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense, because actually those foods are extraordinarily healthy and they're really satiating. They're full of protein, they're full of fibre. They're probably about the healthiest thing you can possibly have. And so it just didn't feel right that we were restricting it for a reason that kind of made sense. But and actually one of the things we do need to do, well, I need to do, is to revise those booklets, because obviously now, since we wrote the book, there are lots of sort of pulse, lentil pastas and flours and edamame bean pastas and things, which are essentially low carb, high protein. So they would count, I think, 20 grams of a sort of a pulse flour or pasta is the equivalent of a protein portion. So that's not built into that leaflet at the moment. That's something I need to.
That's useful, because I know sort of the Facebook group, we've been looking at like hacks of how we can follow the diet.
Absolutely. Well, that's what it's all about. Yeah. So
we've been putting on recipes with those types of pasta, and we've been getting creative with gram flour, the chickpea flour.
So I'm just getting here. So gram flour, green pea flour, lentil, chickpea, black bean, edamame pasta. 20 grams of those is equivalent of one of the protein portions. So the same as an egg or a meat or whatever. Yeah. So that gives you a bit more flex, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And they're quick to make on an evening where you need to quickly have your restricted day dinner. There was one tip from the books. What would be your favourite tip of how to follow the diet, do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna, if I may, I've got three very quick ones. I think the first one is it's about planning. I mean, any diet's about planning. This is not unique to, but it's about being organized and so, you know, and organize what you're going to have for your diet, so you're not caught out, because, you know, quite often it depends where you are, you know, especially if you're away from home, there isn't always available things, or if you happen to be going to work. So planning is key. Once you've, perhaps for the first few weeks, you might need to sort of really plan and perhaps write out some menus and things, but then it should become second nature. Planning's first thing. The second thing is this diet is a little bit different to a lot of diets, in that a lot of diets people start and they go, oh, this is great, and then after about a week it's like, oh my god, this is so awful, I can't do this anymore. This one is quite hard when you start off. So you need to kind of go through a bit of storming. Some people just breeze it and feel totally fine right from the get-go, but some people find it quite challenging the first couple of times they do it. Now, in terms of the 2 days, we find a lot of people find it easier to do them together. You might find when you're just starting off, you might want to do 1 day a week and just see how it goes, or you might find you're a person that just has to do the 2 days separately. But I think just bear in mind, just give it a go. Maybe give it 2 or 3 weeks to settle in. It will get easier. That's the other thing. And yeah, as I say, the other thing is if you find the 2 days difficult, you can split them up. But a lot of people actually find the 2 days easier to do. I don't know what you did, Laura.
I've always done them together, just because what I usually do is duplicate my meals. So I'll make 2 lunches when I'm making the first day's one, and then it's in the fridge for the next day. So then I know it's easy to do.
And it just gets it out of the way, doesn't it? Done. Yeah.
And I think it does become easier in the sense that you understand the portion sizes, and it becomes like second nature. You don't have to keep looking at the grams and the books.
Oh God, no! And I wouldn't expect people to do that. I mean, I'm almost wary. So you do have to, basically, I think you have to put a bit of work in up front in this diet. That's what I'm saying. But I think if you can do that, stick with it, and then it becomes quite easy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much for those tips. So we'll move on to research, and we were just wondering if there's been any developments in research lately that affect the diet that you could fill us in about.
So just very briefly, just to update you. So obviously we developed the diet, as I say, back in 2013. We published the book. So since then, we've actually been testing it out actually in a number of different settings. So we've done some work with women actually having chemotherapy for breast cancer, and that's actually just about to be published. It's been a bit of a long haul, but basically we've shown that women going through chemotherapy for breast cancer can do the diet. It stops them gaining weight, and there is a suggestion that with certain chemotherapies it might reduce some of the severe toxicity. It doesn't get rid of all the toxicity by any means, but it looks quite promising, really. It certainly doesn't do people any harm and stops that weight gain that a lot of people suffer from when they go through chemotherapy. So that's one element. And we've also been testing it in people with type 2 diabetes, including people on insulin. We're about to test it in people with type 1 diabetes who really are always on insulin and insulin dependent, and also women with gestational diabetes who get diabetes when they're pregnant.
Right.
So that's sort of where we're going with that. But the other aspects of other research that's in nutrition that we've become aware of, which does feed into the diet, is, we do need to think about a few things. First of all is making sure we've got a healthy gut microbiome. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that term. We've got about 3 trillion bacteria in our bowels, and they're really important. We need a lot of them. We need different types, but we need the right types. And the right type is basically very much driven by what we eat, and what we eat and how we eat and when we eat. And those bugs, that microbiome has a really profound effect, we think, on our risk of disease, on our appetite even, and our weight, even our mood. So we've no reason to think that the 2-day diet is particularly bad for, it's not going to be bad for our gut microbiome. But the ways that you might make the diet slightly better is by perhaps introducing things like the fermented foods, things like your kefir, kombucha, or some live yogurt, those types of things.
Yeah.
Or and also one of the things that we have included in the diet and in the books is we do allow people to have a relatively good amounts of diet drinks if they choose to do that.
Yeah.
And there is some suggestion now, it's not confirmed by any means, but there are some concerns that maybe if we have a lot of diet products with artificial sweeteners in, they may upset the gut microbiome, which would not be good.
Yeah.
But that's kind of not proven, but it's something that does worry me slightly. So I think what I tend to say to people is, if you can avoid them all, avoid sugar, please, but avoid the sweeteners as well, probably.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then, so in the diet, obviously we're restricting calories for 2 days a week, but we haven't really gone into whether you should eat them in the morning, the afternoon, the evening. And there's a lot of interest in whether when we eat in a day is really important. So the most important thing is the number of calories you eat in that day and the types of calories you eat. But there may be additional benefits from perhaps not eating when we first get up. We don't handle food very well, and certainly not eating in the last 3 hours of the day. So eating more in the middle of the day if we can. But of course, the key thing is people need to be able to do these diets. It needs to be doable, which is where we started off. So for a lot of people, we know that they find it easier to have their calories, perhaps certainly early evening. Stick to that, but don't, you don't have to have them in the morning. You don't have to have breakfast, but try not to eat really late at night is probably
right. Okay.
Yeah. And then the other thing which is linked to that is having a good sleep routine. And if you don't sleep well and it makes you hungry, again, in poor sleep, not enough sleep, poor quality sleep is linked to cancer, even breast cancer, poor health and weight gain. So so your microbiome, perhaps limit the sweeteners, avoid the sweeteners, think about when you're eating, and get good sleep.
Well, that's really useful. Thank you. I think the microbiome thing is stuff that I've not really thought about before, so it might be something to look at. And
we can put some posts on the Facebook.
That'd be really useful.
The different things people can do.
And I guess the last question for you is: do you foresee any changes in the future to the diet? Do you think you'd be suggesting time-restricted eating? Would you be suggesting that in the diet, or is there any other changes you think you'll be making?
So I think that's something we're definitely keep looking at the evidence for that. One area that I really would like to look at with the diet, so we've talked about it very much as a weight loss tool, but we know that obviously the people who are trying to lose weight, they've got there because they've gained weight, which is one of the things we really want to prevent. So we want to do some work. We're planning to do some work trying to, perhaps in younger people, who are a healthy weight, to see whether 1 day a week of the diet can help prevent weight gain and perhaps have some health benefits, to see whether it may have some benefits there. We certainly need to try and adapt the diet a bit more, perhaps for different ethnic groups, make it more affordable. And one of the really big things that, because we're so keen on people having protein for the reasons that we've been going on about this evening, but we need to think about the sources of those protein. We need the diet to be more environmentally sound and reduce its carbon footprint. And so those sorts of things we need to adapt, and also how it fits in with people's families, So I think it's a good start. I think the diet can be improved and adapted for certain groups in different ways, and including older adults. We know that, going back to the old muscle mass, we know that older, frailer people need to eat regular protein. So we need to sort of do some work. And I do have concerns, certainly about time restricted feeding in those populations. So there's a lot to be looking at then. So lots to do.
That's useful, thank you. And we'll look forward to any updates that you can share with the group. That's really useful. Thanks, Michelle. I think we're going to move on to the club now. So I think we're switching over here, and you can ask me a few questions about the Facebook group.
Laura, so why did you start the club, Laura? When did you start it, and why did you start it?
Well, I guess you already know this, and it's common knowledge to people that I had breast cancer in 2017. That was my annus horribilis that year, and I, as you've referenced before, I gained quite a lot of weight during chemotherapy. I think it was the high dose steroids, comfort eating, and I'd also had 2 pregnancies prior to my diagnosis, quite close together. And I came out of my treatment adamant that I was going to make a change to this weight. I didn't want that weight on anymore. And I'd read about the 2-day diet. And I know I came to see you in the August that I finished treatment, and you totally converted me. I owe a lot to you, Michelle, for the changes that I've made in my lifestyle. And I did it for about a year or so, and I had really great results. People were commenting that I looked a lot better, etc. But I felt a lot better. You mentioned before about sluggishness and things like that. I felt a lot more energetic, and with 2 young children, that was really helpful. But I found that it did take some getting used to. It was the planning, the preparation, like you said, what foods to buy, what things to get in, understanding what you can and you can't have. And a big factor for me was incorporating it into family life. I wanted just to us all to eat together, and it not be an obvious thing that, you know, mummy's perhaps eating diet food.
Yes.
And also that we can, you know, just cook one meal and try and adapt it in some way. So all these things were going around my mind. I was really busy, you know, getting on with it and having these ideas. And then I decided it would be good to share these ideas. I roped quite a lot of family and friends into doing the diet with me as well, just to see how we could support each other. And I came up with this idea of having a club. And I had some great support from lovely ladies at Prevent Breast Cancer, and we thought we'd set up this Facebook group, and so it's been running for a couple of years, and it's gone really well. I think it's helped quite a lot of people to just support each other really and get some ideas that aren't out there otherwise online, to help them follow.
So how many members have you got, Laura, now, would you say?
I think we're just over 300 now.
Wow,
I don't think everyone's active, but I think from my point of view, that's 300 people who are aware of the diet now, and who are also aware of the charity. And they know they can come back to us if they perhaps, you know, if they, you know, they're not on the diet at the moment, they could come back later if they want tips, etc.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So Laura, how does the club work? Tell us how it works.
So essentially, it's a platform to share ideas, tips, meals, and perhaps quite importantly, to ask questions and just support each other, really. We've talked about hacks before. We're all about the faux carbs on our restricted days, so we share those. We've got quite a lot of members, and so I'm pleased to announce that a recent development is Prevent Breast Cancer are kindly helping me run the club now. So it hopefully means we'll have quite a lot more updates. It'll help me out because I've gone back to work, and some contributions hopefully from yourself and the dietitians.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe some events going forward as well, but just to make it a really useful platform for the 2-day diet, because I think it's really useful for people to be able to share information and just support each other, really. Yeah, I think it's a useful platform, hopefully, for people. And if there's any ideas that people have as to how we can make it any better, then please share it. I'd be really interested to hear that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource. It's brilliant.
Well, no, that's all down to you, Michelle. Thank you for your expertise. I think we've actually come to the end there of our questions. So thank you very much. And I'm sure it's really helped people in the group as well. It's just a reminder about the books again. So you can buy the books from the charity. The website is there if you want to buy them. Michelle's gone through which how the books are different. I'd also really recommend the cookbook because on each page it does set out the exact portion of like carbohydrate and protein and fat, etc. And I think that's a really useful part of the cookbook. So there's your reminder of how to buy the books. And as I said, if you've got any more questions, please put them on the Facebook group and we'll be happy to help you out. So thanks very much, Michelle. Hopefully speak again soon. Thank you.
Thanks.